Welcome to the Sportsman's Voice Roundup, your weekly look at conservation and sporting community news happening across the nation and on the Hill. Thanks for tuning in. This is the TSV Roundup. Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to this week's edition of the Sportsman's Voice Roundup, your weekly look at conservation news from across the nation for the week of April 21st, 2025. This week's lead story, Arkansas Legislative Session Recap, a collection of excellent news for sportsmen and women. New commission appointments bring balance in Washington. CSF opposes Massachusetts bill to prohibit hunting and fishing in old-growth forest reserves. A big one there. Legislation to strengthen private property protections on the move in North Carolina. And finally, bridging connections between current and future conservation policy leaders in South Carolina. Let us get to our lead story. Unfortunately, I'm not able to bring Kent Keene in to boast about the good work happening in Arkansas. But I will do my best to fill in for him and tell his story. Before I do invite you folks to, right now, as long as you're not driving, as I always say, pull those phones out wherever you're listening to us. And if you have not subscribed, followed, or its equivalent, do so now. Never miss a show. It helps us as far as being discovered, pushing the show up, and continuing the tremendous growth of the program. And while you're there, if you're in Apple or Spotify, which is where most of you are, you have the option to hit 5 stars. If you would, scroll down to the end of this show, on the bottom of the show, under the show notes in Apple, and you can hit them 5 stars. And then in Spotify, there's an option to the right of the show. You can leave a 5-star rating there as well. And all those matter. So we thank you for that support. We thank you for your participation in that. Now, to Kent Keene's article on the legislative session recap in Arkansas. Even states as pro-sportsmen as Arkansas have opportunities to further support sportsmen and women by enacting new legislation. This session, Arkansas saw several important bills introduced, with many of them successfully crossing the finish line before the legislature adjourned last week. From updating the no net loss baseline to preempting laws related to knife possession and the recognition of the 75th anniversary of the Dinkle-Johnson Act, natural state sportsmen and women have plenty to celebrate. And this will serve more as an update. As you may remember, if you're a regular listener, we did cover quite a bit of this here the recent weeks. So Arkansas's 2025 legislative session recessed on April 16th until May 5th, at which time they can reconvene for a limited remaining business or adjourn the 95th General Assembly sine die. During legislative session, several key pieces of pro-sportsmen legislation were passed, including knife preemption language, liability protections for shooting sports events, protections against the tracking of firearm purchases, updates to Arkansas's no net loss baseline, recognition of the 75th anniversary of the Dinkle-Johnson Act, and more. Additional legislative efforts to provide the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission with reimbursements for future discounted hunting or fishing licenses offered by the legislature failed to pass. However, the important conversations that this bill kickstarted will carry forward into the future, and efforts to enact this legislation will be forthcoming. So Kent goes into some results here, and I will do my best not to make this more of a verbal PowerPoint. But if you want to follow along, go to congressionalsportsman.org, congressionalsportsman.org. You can go to our media center, follow along, and utilize the in-text links to bring you to these bills. House Bill 1007 provides enhanced liability protections for the host of a shooting sporting event. That was signed into law March 6th. House Bill 1117 evaluates the appropriate age for in-school firearm safety instruction and provides guidelines for such curriculum across the state, signed into law March 4th. House Bill 1418, this is a priority for CSF, expands existing firearm preemption statute to include knives and knife-making components, signed into law February 25th. House Bill 1509 prohibits the use of discriminatory merchant category codes to distinguish firearm retailers from other lawful retailers in the state. Signed into law April 3rd. We have that particular topic have covered extensively on this particular program. House Bill 1827, also CSF priority legislation, updates Arkansas's no net loss of public hunting and fishing access to include both lands owned and leased by Arkansas Game and Fish Commission. Signed, sent to the governor on April 14th. That is awaiting Governor Sanders' signature. House Resolution 1045 commemorates the 75th anniversary of the Sport Fish Restoration Program as part of the American System of Conservation Funding. Also a priority of ours, and you might have heard the last couple of weeks, Chris Horton talking on this very subject and on our feature drop last Thursday. That resolution was adopted on April 7th. CSF is leading the way in every state house and on the Hill to commemorate this momentous occasion, and we'll be doing so probably in the next year, the year after, perhaps, as we look to commemorate the 90th anniversary of Benton Robinson. Continuing the addition of these bills, the progress of House Bill 1632 in both chambers represents major victory for sportsmen and women. The bill would have provided the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission with reimbursements for any future discounted hunting and fishing licenses offered by the legislature. While the bill ultimately ran out of time, the conversations held this year will be invaluable as we continue to pursue this effort in the future. CSF applauds the strong body of work produced this session by the sportsmen legislatures of the natural state, and is thankful for the leadership demonstrated by the Arkansas Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus, led by Representative Jeff Wardlaw, co-chair and National Assembly Sportsmen's Caucus Executive Council President. CSF also thanks Governor Sportsman's Caucus member Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders for her signature on each of these important pieces of legislation. I'm sure if Kent was here, when able to join us, he would give us more of the inside baseball on the process and how some of this went, but largely his work in combination with the leadership of Representative Wardlaw, our NASC president, was able to deliver many victories, and we thank both of those gentlemen for their work, their efforts, and leadership on those. So, good on Arkansas, and we hope to see similar results throughout the country as sessions adjourn or are coming up on that here in the coming weeks and months. Moving along, other news. New commission appointments bring balance to Washington State. This is from Marie Newmiller. Governor Bob Ferguson recently named 3 appointments to Washington's Fish and Wildlife Commission: Jim Anderson, Victor Garcia, and Molly Linville. These appointments follow the Reckleshaus study, which found that the commission had devolved into dysfunction in recent years. CSF celebrates the opportunity for the commission to reconstruct its foundation based upon the North American model of wildlife management. The move by the governor there in Washington to appoint these 3 commissioners has sparked optimism among a large contingent of the sporting conservation community by signaling a recommitment to the North American model of wildlife management, a science-based framework that has sustained wildlife populations for over a century. The path of these appointments has been fraught with tension over the past 6 years as anti-hunting groups increasingly push for commission seats to shift policy away from consumptive use, instead advocating for ecological priorities that neglect the proven benefits of sportsman-funded, user-paid public benefits model of conservation funding and action. This push exacerbated dysfunction within the commission, as detailed in the 2024 report I mentioned earlier, which described the commission as politically polarized and lacking transparent appointment criteria. After the After the report was published and presented to the legislature, Governor Ferguson's office withdrew two of Governor Inslee's last-minute commission appointees. Removing those appointees initiated a rigorous selection process that included outreach to WDFW user groups like CSF and prioritized candidates with ties to hunting, fishing, ag, and conservation. The appointed commissioners have unique backgrounds and bring experience and expertise to the body that will support a continuation of the North American model. Molly Linville is a former wildlife biologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and a current rancher with experience in range management, habitat support, and fire suppression. Jim Anderson, with a Master of Science in Environmental Science, has vast experience as fisheries manager with policy credentials at the local, state, and federal levels. Victor Garcia holds degrees in zoology and science education, was a commercial fisher, science teacher, and enjoys hunting. These new appointees bring experience that aligns with the North American model of wildlife management. Through outreach to a wide variety of agency constituent groups by keeping an open appointment process, Governor Ferguson, in part, addressed the report's call for appointment reform that was aimed at reducing polarization and restoring trust. CSF has worked diligently to protect against anti-hunting pushes uh, on the WDFW Commission through participation in the aforementioned study, advocating for a return to the North American model and working with our partner organizations to support qualified candidates. We look forward to engaging with these new commissioners and will remain a voice and support science-based wildlife management that preserves our hunting, fishing, trapping tradition for generations to come. So that's welcome, positive news out of Washington State. Again, another topic we've covered quite a bit, especially last session, as we had multiple attempts to restructure or to seat obstructionists and outright anti-hunting, anti-conservation commissioners across the country. A growing and continuing trend that we see uh, to uh, to undermine and thwart the standard that has been for, in some cases, hundreds of years. It's a fight we will continue to have, and it's not going away. But it is a positive development to see a state like Washington, as Marie detailed, that's been wrought with controversy and dysfunction, uh, to have these positive moves. For now, we'll see, and Marie will let us know how that all works out. Heading up to the Northeast, CSF opposes Massachusetts bill to prohibit hunting and fishing in old growth forest reserves. And I said at the top, this is a big one. And it is because I don't recall seeing something like this before. And I think my colleagues would agree. This from Christian Ragosta. Massachusetts House Bill 903 was introduced into the Joint Committee on the Environment Natural Resources this past month. The legislation would authorize the establishment of old growth forest reserves on state owned lands, which include old growth forests, plus vaguely defined buffer areas where sustainable forestry and wildlife habitat improvement practices would be prohibited. The bill would also authorize prohibiting certain activities in old growth forest reserves, including fishing and hunting. That is a problem. If enacted, the law would be the first in the country to authorize, there you go, it's first in the country, to authorize the prohibition of hunting and fishing on public land based on forest stand successional stage. So-called buffer areas around old-growth forests are ill-defined and would consist of significant portions of state-owned land around targeted areas. The power to prohibit hunting and angling in old-growth forests and surrounding buffer areas would be explicitly granted by the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs. Old growth forests are an underrepresented forest habitat type in Massachusetts. However, Mass House Bill 903, which would authorize the designation of old growth forest reserves comprised of old growth forests plus buffer areas on state owned lands, would do little, if anything, to change that despite its intent to protect old growth. As the Massachusetts Forest Action Plan states, the vast majority of old growth forests on public lands in Massachusetts are protected by small patch reserves or large reserves. Protections for old growth forests are already in place. Conversely, young forests are also underrepresented, and prioritizing management for early successional habitats is important to support a wide range of game and non game species, including many species of great conservation need. Beyond the inherent problems with this bill being a solution in search of a problem, there are also technical aspects within the language that are highly problematic. For example, the buffer area definition is subjective and provides little guidance regarding how big a buffer area should be. For example, distance from the edge of an old growth forest stand, total acreage, so on and so forth. Apart from sufficient size configuration, giving the secretary ultimate authority to define sufficient size and configuration without guidelines, it is critically important for the forest, for a range of forest age classes and habitats to be represented across the landscape to enhance biodiversity and support a wider range of wildlife species. And there is concern that forest managers will lose management flexibility and not be able to create habitat diversity with wildlife because of lack of clarity and potential overreach when designating buffer areas. Of utmost concern is giving the authority to prohibit hunting and angling practices in these ill-defined areas as the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs, which would directly impact access for sportsmen and women who are the best stewards of our wildlife. Sportsmen and women provide, on average, nearly 60% of the funds used by state fish and wildlife agencies to carry out their critical conservation missions. Massachusetts Division of Fishery and Wildlife receives, and that's Mass Wildlife, 85% of its budget from sportsmen and women. Quote, we are not aware of any situation across the country and cannot think of an example of how fishing or hunting would negatively impact the protection and management of old growth forests, let alone stands that are not old growth forest buffer areas, said John Colclaser, Senior Director of Forest Policy for CSO. John continues, the suitable standard in the bill is vague and opens the door for capricious decision making that could bar anglers and hunters from accessing publicly owned land, including land purchased and or managed with funding generated through hunting and fishing licenses and excise tax on sporting related goods. The user pay public benefits American system of conservation funding, end quote. CSF continues to work with and monitor the forestry issues to maintain access for hunters, anglers, trappers, and recreational shooters, as well as making sure best practices are utilized for habitat management, directly working with our wildlife agencies such as Mass Wildlife. We're keeping a close eye on this. Um, yeah, that's no good right there. And I would echo John's sentiment. Um, I don't I don't see how either of these activities, hunting or fishing or trapping or recreational shooting, would have negative effects on old growth. Matter of fact, I can think of examples of old growth stands where I live that you can do everything on, and they remain as useless as any other old growth stand. I say that in jest. They're not completely useless, but I mean, aside from the aesthetically pleasing value and kind of walking through on the landscape, not a whole lot of value, especially for the critters. Um, Yeah, that has a potential to be very problematic. And Massachusetts, unfortunately, continues to deliver on poor policy efforts and implementation. Christian will surely continue to update us as well as John um, in his capacity as our forestry director. And in North Carolina, legislation to strengthen private property protections is on the move. On February 27th, Senate Bill 220, sponsored by several members of the North Carolina Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus, was introduced, which would strengthen private property protections by requiring that individuals receive permission before accessing public trust waters from land or before hunting, fishing, or trapping on private land that is not posted in accordance with the provisions of Statute 14159.7. On April 8th, Senate Bill 220 was amended to remove a section that would have prohibited the launching of motorized and non-motorized boats from a public right-of-way. Senate Bill 220 subsequently passed out of committee as amended and passed the Senate on a 40-2 vote and is now awaiting further consideration in the House. More than 80% of land in North Carolina is privately owned, which underscores the importance of uniform private property protections. While North Carolina offers a wide variety of public lands open to pursuing your favorite game species, many hunters rely on private land to pursue our favorite time-honored traditions. Access is consistently at the forefront of the minds of sportsmen and women, regardless of the game species that they look to pursue. Hunters often count on the generosity of private landowners to either grant permission to hunt their property or allow for a property to be leased for hunting. I prefer the former personally. By strengthening private property protections and in turn combating trespassing, both landowners and hunters who depend on private land for hunting access will benefit from the changes proposed in Senate Bill 220. Furthermore, CSF supports the removal of language from the bill that would have prevented a person from launching a motorized or unmotorized boat from a public right of way. Done safely, public right of ways offer valuable fishing access to public water. Further, anglers are the primary conservation funding source for fisheries management in North Carolina through license sales and matching federal funds through the Federal Aid and Sportfish Restoration Act, also known as the Dingell-Johnson Act, which places 10% excise tax on fishing equipment. CSF celebrates a win for fisheries access and looks forward to working with the caucus and our partners to strengthen private property protections and promote equitable access for North Carolina sportsmen. We're going to wrap it up here. This from Isabella Mucci, bridging connections between current and future conservation policy leaders in South Carolina. We're talking about the Collegiate Sportsmen and Women Coalition. CSF is continuing to support existing collegiate coalitions by facilitating opportunities for students to meet, network, and learn from state legislators and in-state conservation partners. CSF provides the Collegiate Sportsmen and Women Coalition members with opportunities to attend Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus events in their state where students can network and learn from caucus members and in-state conservation partners. These events provide Collegiate Sportsmen and Women Coalition members with connections and educational experiences that help enhance their college experience and prepare them for future careers in conservation and public policy. On April 9th, a group of Collegiate Sportsmen and Women Coalition members and officers from the University of South Carolina, USC, were able to attend the South Carolina Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus policy reception. This event was well attended by coalition students, caucus members, and in-state partners. Students were able to hear from legislators about many key policy issues and legislative efforts in South Carolina, including an update on South Carolina House Bill 3872, which would limit the loss of available acreage open to hunting for South Carolina sportsmen and women by establishing a minimum acreage of South Carolina Department of Natural Resources open lands, owned lands open to hunting. Additionally, Congressional Sportsmen and Women Coalition at USC's inaugural President Abigail Wright connected incoming officers with legislators and in-state partners that help support their coalition to ensure that the coalition will continue to have strong leadership after her graduation. Abigail spoke about her experiences with bringing the coalition to USC, saying that, quote, starting a coalition during my final year of school has been incredibly rewarding. I've loved bringing together like-minded students, introducing them to the world of conservation and the role that sportsmen and women play in conservation efforts, and encouraging everyone to get outdoors. I'm so excited to see how the coalition continues to grow and evolve in the years to come, end quote. Coalition South Carolina students were invited to attend the Springs Caucus policy reception, as well as other caucus events like the South Carolina Southern Sporting Classic each fall, and exciting CSF events such as our annual NASC Sportsman Legislative Summit. These events provide students with valuable networking opportunities and help to educate the next generation of conservation leaders about the essential role that policymaking process plays in protecting our outdoor pursuits. It's a big deal. These coalitions that Isabella manages and part of our program. Obviously, I sound completely different this week. I'm trying to speak in hushed tones as I am on location for the NEAFA conference at Bretton Woods in New Hampshire. The walls are paper thin, and I'm trying not to be heard or have my neighbors hear the broadcast here, at least while I'm recording. So forgive the NPR type monotone offering I'm giving you this week. It's not lack of enthusiasm, though it is a bit distracting for yours truly and hopefully not for you. Uh, saying all that, conversations being had while here at the conference with leaders at state agencies identifying what we've talked about on this program, and in that young people coming out of higher education with their undergrads or beyond um, are not coming out with the same appreciation for true conservation and sportsmen and women's role in that. Matter of fact, there's really seems to have been a philosophical shift in recent probably half a dozen years. It's kind of to the contrary. And folks coming out with more of a preservationist mindset, or even more dangerously, some influential leadership and management in some of the state agencies have decided to adopt this or are taking advantage of their recent hires, their fresh hires, fresh out of higher education. And, it almost seems like stacking the deck. Yeah, folks wanting to reanalyze the North American model, folks looking to potentially exercise their own personal issues with hunting specifically, and change the funding model and reevaluate Pittman Robinson. All this is very troubling and quite frankly dangerous talk. Completely just underscoring the importance of the work that Isabella and these students are doing that are involved in these coalitions that are being set up around the country and more and more every week, it seems like. There I think we announced Wyoming last week. I know Isabella's got some future, um, announcements coming, which is exciting, and really, the more these kids can get involved and participate in what we're offering and utilize CSF in the coalition program, hopefully start heading some of this off. Ultimately, I mean, you're not gonna get every kid that's involved in a wildlife program or wildlife science, whatever it is at their school. Hundreds of these kids, and obviously we're not gonna have hundreds right away with these coalitions, but the hard workers, the savvy ones, see the value in it are joining, and hopefully you're spreading the word, telling their friends about it, get more membership there, and continue to bring what has worked for almost a century uh, as new talent into our state agencies and the federal agencies, and not allow this disastrous mindset preservationist philosophy to further entrench itself into these agencies that are charged with managing our resources. It's a scary thought, and again, and hopefully we can head it off. Thank you to my colleagues for all of their reporting, and again, my apologies to you, the audience, for not being able to bring you the ever entertaining and keen. And no, I mean that in all seriousness, and his ability to really spin a tale here of the hard work, and give that the due enthusiasm that he can bring. So we'll bring Kent back on another time to be sure. We're gonna wrap it up here, guys. Obviously, a way shorter, and I'm sure you appreciate that. We've been so busy; these episodes have run quite long. Typically, this is where the sweet spot, where I'd like to stay. We've just had so much good stuff to report on, and some troubling stuff. So I thank you for having us along and tuning in. And again, my apologies. I hope you didn't fall asleep in these 35 or so minutes with my very NPR stylistic presentation this week. I will do better next week, especially on the heels of a youth weekend turkey season opener. Hopefully, have a good story to tell there, and then the anticipation of the northern New England states opening up on May 1st, and future feature episodes to come out of all that. So, with that said, we thank you. Remember to subscribe, follow, rate where available. We appreciate it. And we will catch up with you next Wednesday. Double check my schedule here just to make sure I'm giving you accurate information before I sign off. Yes, indeed. Next Thursday, feature episode. I sit down and talk with a director in Wyoming for their fishing game department, Angie Bruce. I brought her to you on our SHOT Show coverage back in January. Enjoyed the conversation so much that we both agreed that a long form sit down was in order, and we do just that. Very good conversation. I'm looking forward to dropping that next Thursday. So do look forward to tuning in and hearing more about Wyoming and what they are doing out there. It's some really exciting stuff. As always, CSF is your inside connection to outdoor legislation. We'll see you next Wednesday and Thursday. Be safe out there. So long.
Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your support is crucial, and you can help us out right now by leaving a review, filling in those 5 stars where available, sharing this episode with friends and family, and engaging with us socially. CSF can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Together, we can protect the outdoor sports we love and continue to keep you informed wherever you are. That's it for this week. Until next time, we'll see you later.